Sunshine Church Prophecy Update. Looking at the world through the lens of Bible prophecy. Watching for the return of Christ with Pastor Jason and Keith.
Well, welcome to Sunshine Church Prophecy Podcast. Keith, and you can see Jason's not here today. He's actually on vacation. And today with me, I have a special guest. Her name's Lindsey Medenwaldt. She is the Ministry Operations Director at Mama Bear Apologetics. She's an adjunct professor at Northwestern College in Iowa. She's an author, speaker, does a lot of things, and really has some interesting work that I think all of you guys will enjoy. And so as you can see, our title is Freemasonry. So welcome, Lindsey.
Hi, Keith. I'm so glad to be joining you today. Yeah,
we're excited. So I know I've probably butchered it, but so you do Mama Bear Apologetics, right?
Yeah. So I'm actually, you caught me at an interesting time in my life because Hillary is the founder of Mama Bear Apologetics, and she was telling me that it's all been building to this moment for me. So I'm actually transitioning into a full-time professor role at Northwestern College this fall, and I will be transitioning out of my administrative role at Mama Bear in the fall as well. I've been on the administrative side of Mama Bear and as a speaker since about 2018. Mama Bear Apologetics was created by Hillary Ferrer in order to equip moms so that they could equip their kids in Orthodox Christianity. And it's an apologetics ministry. Really, at the time of its founding in 2015, there were not really many ministries that were targeting moms in particular. Apologetics has sort of been a male-dominated field. For those who maybe aren't familiar with apologetics, all it is giving a defense for what you believe. It comes from the Greek word apologia. It does not mean apologizing. Some viewers might ask that question. We're not apologizing for being Christians. What we're doing is we're giving defense for why Christianity is rational and true. Anyway, there were not many ministries targeting moms and helping moms. And we were really inspired by the fact that a lot of youth were leaving the church, and we were asking ourselves why. And one of the thought processes was, hey, what if we equip moms so that they can answer the questions that their kids might have? And Mama Bear Apologetics was born. We have several books. We have a podcast, and we have a blog. So it's been really quite a joy to be able to serve Mama Bear since 2018. It's a bittersweet transition for me, but I am so excited to be moving into a full-time professor role. My husband also works at Northwestern College, so it'll be a really nice thing he and I were just walking at the college the other day, and he goes, it'll be really nice to be in the same place. I said, that'd be so nice.
So are you going to teach apologetics?
No, I am not. So Northwestern College is a Christian college. It's a private Christian college. And we are required to integrate our faith into everything we teach. But I am in the business and economics department. I have law degree, and so I will be using my law degree and my seminary degree, which is I have a master's in apologetics and ethics. I also have a master's in public administration. So I'll be using all of those degrees to teach classes like business law. I teach business writing, I teach marketing, public relations, and it's just a really fun opportunity for me to shift from being an adjunct into a full-time role.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's cool. And you have, I want to say you have what, 2 books now, or do you have one coming out soon?
Yeah, so I have my first book, which is Bridge Building Apologetics. That was published in May 2024 from Harvest House. Doug Groteis and I just finished a book called What If Jesus Was Right? And that will hopefully, we just submitted the manuscript, so the editors haven't gotten back to us. So I'm always a little bit nervous to say, and it will come out. But it's through Tyndale, and it's a short book focusing on some of the false claims about Jesus that are made by people. So he was just a moral teacher is one of those claims, right? What should we do with that kind of claim? We also tackle some fake Jesuses is what we call them in the manuscript. So the Jesus, universal Jesus, or the cosmic Christ, or whatever fake Jesuses that are not aligned with Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second half of the book is, what were Jesus's claims? Can we believe what he said? Is there evidence to support that Jesus was right? And the last chapter is really a call to a decision. Hey, we've presented you with these facts, and this is how you know that Scripture is true. And we really encourage you to make a choice. Are you going to follow Jesus? It's a book that's not just for Christians. It is for non-Christians as well. And hopefully it'll bolster the faith of Christians who are already believing, but might have to answer questions about Jesus and his different claims. Hopefully we'll equip you with that. So it's an easy go-to book. But it is a shorter book. I think it's like 56,000 words right now.
Okay.
Comparison, my first book was 75,000 words. It's about 270 pages long.
Okay.
So a little bit shorter than that.
Yeah. Cool. That sounds awesome. I'm excited to hear about that and see it. I know my wife has some apologetic books, the Mama Bear apologetic books. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Doug has written, Doug Groteis is a philosopher. He was my apologetics professor in seminary at Denver Seminary. He is now at Cornerstone in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But he is a philosopher by trade. I mean, he's very deep. Sometimes I have to ask him to repeat himself because I don't understand the words. But he is a great teacher and very patient. And he's written so many books about a lot of things, particularly the New Age movement, which was pretty big in the 70s and 80s. And we're seeing a resurgence of that now. A lot of New Age ideas are kind of seeping their ways into the church. And kind of becoming, unfortunately, syncretized with Christianity in some ways. So that syncretization means that we're kind of adopting it as our own practices. A common example would be Christians using crystals as part of their prayer life. Well, that's a New Age pagan ritual. That's not a Christian ritual.
Right.
Or Christians using meditation as part of their prayer life, or there is a variety of New Age stuff that has sort of made its way in, and so what was new in the 70s and 80s is now new again in the 2020s, So I encourage people to look up Doug's old books because I think they're still relevant.
Yeah. So going to our topic, Freemasonry, and we had talked before we came on. I'm interested in it. How did you get into it? Yeah.
So honestly, well, I mean, the buildings are always interesting, right? And their temples and their lodges are buildings that make you ask questions. Oftentimes they don't have windows, or they have only a few windows, and they're big cement. Sometimes they're marble buildings. Really beautiful at times. There's one in Waco where I used to live, and it is a beautiful building. I've been inside of it. They have events like theater performances and other events that are hosted in it, not just Masonic events. And so I've sort of been interested probably since I was in high school. I shared with you that there was a book I picked up in college. I like to learn. So I was interested in secret societies at the time. So I picked up a book by Anthony Sutton called America's Secret Establishment. And that book was about the Skull and Bones secret society at Yale and all of these conspiracies associated with that society. In that book, Masons are mentioned, the Illuminati is mentioned. And then I'm really into action movies like Indiana Jones and National Treasure. And those movies often kind of go around conspiracy theories involving not just Masons, right? But all the first National Treasure was explicitly about the Masons.
Yeah.
And kind of like, okay, asking myself questions. What is this even? And can I join was a question, and I can't. There are a couple of female organizations, and also should I join? What are the ramifications of a person joining an organization like this? And I continue to research it off and on in the last several decades, but nothing like hard, like I haven't written anything about it or anything. Full disclosure, I did join a sorority in college. And over the course of the research that I've done, I've discovered that some of the rituals, which I can't like reveal, look, it's a secret society, right? Mm-hmm. Here I am coming at you from an organization that I can't divulge some secrets. And so there's always just been this fascination of secrecy. And the good news is that if you knew the sorority that I was a member of, you could find all of these so-called secret information, just like you can with Freemasons now, because we have the internet.
Yeah.
And so what was once so secretive and held close to people's hearts is no longer that way. And I think that is probably a good thing in the real world to kind of pull the negative misconceptions we might have about certain organizations, but also to help Christians navigate, hey, should I join that organization? What does this mean for a person of faith, a person of Christian faith in particular, to join an organization like this one? And is it aligned with my Christian beliefs? I have stepped away in many ways from, I was heavily involved for a while in my sorority, and some things have sort of changed over time. And I have, the decision to step away from that in the last couple of years. And that's been an interesting choice, but we've seen Masons step away from Masonry as well. And sometimes you have to make those choices. And we can talk about that as we go along.
Mm-hmm. So how did it get started? Because when I look at Freemasonry, for example, these last 3 years, I teach fifth grade and U.S. history. And so one of the things when we talk about the Revolutionary War, what we did was I had the kids, we would write like essays or do projects on different figures of the Revolutionary War, George Washington, Thomas Paine, Ben Franklin, and all these guys.
Cool.
And sometimes the kids would be like, hey, Mr. Steele, what's this group called Masonry, like Freemasonry? Why does it say George Washington was a Freemason? Like, and then I, obviously my curiosity, I kind of know a little bit about it. I'm just like, well, it's just a group he was in, I don't want to with the little kid, but it's like, at the same time, I'm wondering like, I know that this must've came from England somewhere.
Yes.
Or somewhere over there. Like, how did it start?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Even different Masons will have different origin stories. And origin stories are always really fascinating because you do want to know how things begin. So I've seen some Masons say that it started in the garden with Adam and Eve. I've seen a lot of Masons will say that it started with King Solomon, which would make sense because a stone mason is how the group was really formed. People who build sculptures or build buildings like Solomon's Temple, right? They're called stone masons. And then they had this organization called the Freemasons. And eventually they opened their doors to people who were not just operationally stonemason. They were just people who were interested in joining the club, right? And supporting the stonemason. So I would say that depending on who you talk to, it has its origin story in the Old Testament times, but practically speaking, for our purposes, probably in the 1600s and 1700s is really when it started to take hold and become a real organization. It's fraternal organization, I guess, is how we can call it. It does claim to be a fraternity, which is a group of men who get together and do things.
Yeah.
I'm not in the organization, right? Like I never joined the Masons, and we have some ideas about what happens behind closed doors, but as far as their origin, I would say we don't have any Masonic documents before 1400. So it gets a little testy to say it definitely started here.
Yeah.
As far as membership goes, sometimes people ask like how many people are actually Masons. It's gone down in numbers over the years as organizational membership in general has declined, right? Like this is an issue that a lot of organizations are facing. So there are about 6 million Freemasons around the world. And it's, they're trying to find ways to encourage younger generations to join. I did find some videos featuring people who are younger than I am, who are joining because of they're looking for male mentorship.
Mhm.
And this is a great place to find that. They're also looking for a brotherhood not associated necessarily with college. It's something that they can be a member of for their whole lives. There are ranks to attain. So that's kind of a draw, like, oh, how high can I go as a member? And so younger people may be moving into the direction of joining the Masons. But in general, it is older men currently who are members of the groups. Men almost exclusively, but there are a couple of female Mason groups. It's the Order of Women Freemasons, and it's Freemasonry for Women. So those are the two main ones that women can join. And I think those started in the early 1900s. And those are exclusively run by women. No men are allowed in there, just like no women are allowed in the rituals in the male counterparts. And there are also some co-masonry groups that exist, which are both male and female. So one of those examples would be the Order of the Eastern Star, Order of the Eastern Star. But mostly it would be you joining the Masons because you're a man. And that's fine. I've got no problems with that. But when we look at some of their rituals and things, it does interesting to me that men join that kind of group because it's theatrical, and not that there's anything wrong with men in theater, but they put on costumes and it's very artsy almost. And to have a lot of men joining a lodge and then doing some of their rituals, and then hearing who was a member. You already mentioned George Washington. He wasn't a theater guy, but he was in the Masons, right? And knowing what their rituals are, it just is really interesting to me to know what happens. And I do, because it's not so secret anymore. But what happens behind closed doors.
Yeah, I always understood Freemasonry, like the way it started was a group of guys who knew how to build, knew certain skills, and they were kind of like a guild, I guess, or like a union, I guess maybe we'd call them. But basically, they like stuck together and wanted to keep their knowledge together. That's like kind of how I always assumed it to be. And then later, like you said, it kind of spread out to where they try to grow their numbers. I think 6 million people is quite a lot. That's a lot of people.
Fewer than the Jehovah's Witnesses. So Jehovah's Witnesses are about 8 million worldwide. Which, people are always like, that's not very many. You're right. It's not very many. Yeah. So yeah, it's not that many. But at the same time, the odds are pretty good. Somebody who's a Mason.
Yeah. That's interesting. So how much would you say they influenced the birth of the country? This is interesting to me because we could pull out a dollar bill and see a bunch of Masonry symbols on it. It seems like if you know what you're looking for in most textbooks and U.S. history textbooks, you see different things. I know when I went to Washington, D.C., I didn't know what I know now, but looking back, I'm like, man, it was everywhere. How big was it in the founding of the country?
Oh, it again depends on who you ask. I will say that Washington, D.C. is organized like a Masonic city. So if you look at it from above, it's got the shapes that would be associated with the Masons. Kind of makes sense because George Washington was a Mason. Ben Franklin was a Mason. Paul Revere was a Mason. So really, if you're looking at our founding fathers, I think the number is close to like 20 or 22 of the founding fathers were Masons. Pretty big influence. Some will say, well, it wasn't specifically influenced, right, on American. But if you're a Mason, or let's just put ourselves as Christians. If you're a Christian and you've got these tightly held beliefs, or you've got these things that you hold dear to you, it should bleed out into the things that you do in life, right?
For
Like
sure. Yeah.
people should know you're a Christian. And nobody was hiding the fact that they were Masons. And so if you're a Mason and that's something that you do and you're proud of it and you're into it, it would make sense that that would bleed out into the things that you're doing, even if it's in your trade. So for me, it makes sense to look at the things like the Constitution, that in the Bill of Rights, they seem to be influenced by Masonic language, because Masonic language kind of focuses on freedom or enterprise. And we see that in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, right? The Declaration of Independence. And then when you're looking at the way that it sort of Americans separating themselves from royalty and the monarchy, and you know, in the Revolutionary War, we've got this separation, and so it makes sense that there is an influence. That said, it's not some big conspiracy that the Masons are taking over everything, or that they've hidden treasure in Mount Rushmore, or you can name your, I think I'm mixing National Treasure films, but you know, Dan Brown's, you know, books, they also kind of focus on Masonry. This idea that there are secret messages behind the Declaration of Independence, or that this group of Masons is hiding history and like keeping it safe, which we'll talk about the Templars in a little bit. But this idea of keeping information secret from the rest of society, this is where it bleeds out to things like flat earth theory. Did we really land on the moon? Well, Buzz Aldrin, who's a 33rd degree Mason, would say, yeah. But there are just certain conspiracies that bleed out if we start taking it to conclusions that we love conspiracies.
Yeah.
Just as we love secret things, right? We want to know. We don't want things to be secret. We want things to be in the light. And that's really interesting, because a lot of the Masonic language is all about revealing things and bringing things into the light. I mean, they start their rituals blindfolded when they're going through their initiation rituals. And then literally the light turns on when their blindfold is taken off. And they're brought into this knowledge. And everybody wants to be in the knowledge. And I think that's why we continue to see films about the influence of Masons in the United States. And it is, you know, you mentioned the dollar bill. We're going to talk about symbols later, but, you know, there are several symbols that are Masonic symbols that have been sort of embedded in history. This all-seeing eye, for example, which is what we see on the dollar bill, with the pyramid. You know, you could say that's Masonic, but actually in Christian terms, the all-seeing eye is God's omniscience. And when we look at Renaissance art, it actually has Christian undertones. So you could argue, hey, maybe it's not, you know, Horus, which is also, you know, the Egyptian Horus. Maybe it's this Christian idea of the Christian God being omniscience and being all-knowing and all-seeing. And that's what we see on the back of the dollar bill. Okay. But it really is, Keith, who you talk to and who you ask. And there are theories galore about all of the different symbols that are within the Masons.
It kind of seems like Gnosticism in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah. So there is interesting, because there's some dualism involved in Masonry, a lot of light dark things. But I think we might place too much religious emphasis on organizations that are not inherently religious. And I'm saying that cautiously when I'm talking about the Freemasons, because I think it is a religious organization in a sense. I think it might be its own religion in some ways. But I'm always a little bit cautious of placing some worldviews on other worldviews and saying, that's definitely that. Now, we will talk about the Latter-day Saints in a little bit. And that is definitely an integration of Masonry. unquestionably, it is an integration of Masonry.
Yeah. So there's 33 degrees, right, of Masonry. Basically, like any new person can go in and get like 1 through 3.
Yes.
From what I understand. But then going up from there, it's like there's more commitment, right?
Yeah. So it starts with the Blue Lodge. Everybody can, well, men and I guess women, if you're talking about female lodges, but let's just go with men at this point.
Okay.
So a man walks in and he's like, hey, I want to join. And there's a vetting process. They do a background check. They do, character checks. They have meetings and get to know this person. And so you've got this entered apprentice season where they're kind of learning about the lodge and they're learning about the Masons. And then they move up to something called fellowcraft, which is, again, these are very stonemason words, right? So apprentice, fellowcraft. And then you move up to master mason. And that is the highest degree in the Blue Lodge. Blue is an interesting is an interesting color for them to choose as one of their primary colors, because it is a symbol historically and according to the Masons of universal friendship and the pursuit of wisdom and truth. So really there are meanings in the things that the Masons have chosen. They don't just pick words or pick colors or pick designs for any willy-nilly reason. There are reasons for their choices. Another thing is, have you ever heard anybody say you're giving them the third degree? Have you ever heard that phrase? It's kind of an old school phrase. But what that phrase means, so I was a journalist. My very first degree is in journalism. And one of the phrases giving the person a third degree is when you're like really asking them a lot of questions. It's like a rigorous interrogation, like question after question. Cops are often, that's what they're said to do, is giving them the third degree. That comes from Masonry. Because in order to get to the third degree, which is Master Mason, you have to go through a rigorous interrogation process. And you're asked a lot of questions and a lot of vetting happens. Once you hit that level, you could be completely content and you could just go to your meetings and participate in the rituals. You don't really have any obligation to move up in the ranks. But why wouldn't you? If you're already going to be there and you're already kind of doing the work, you might as well move up in the ranks. So there are 2 rites that you can choose. Rite, R-I-T-E. You can choose the Scottish rite or the York rite. You can actually do both, I think. But the Scottish rite is the one where you can go up to the 33rd degree. And the 33rd degree is sort of an honorary position. You really shouldn't be asking for them to appoint you to the 33rd degree. Instead, you're somebody who you're super dedicated to the cause. You spend all of your time at the lodge, or you're constantly volunteering, or you donate a lot of money, and you're just a committed Mason. And you've shown that over the years. You will likely be invited to be a 33rd degree. Really, there aren't that many 33rd degrees. You've got Harry Truman was a 33rd degree. John Glenn and Buzz Aldrin. I already mentioned him. Thurgood Marshall was a 33rd degree. When I was living in Waco, I went to a musical performance, and it was in the lodge. And so they do open up their lodge for regular people who are not members, but they close it when they're having rituals or other meetings where the public isn't allowed to see. So I went in and very curious. I'm always just very curious. I want to learn. And I'm walking around with my daughter, and I'm kind of looking. It's sort of set up like a museum in some ways. There are little areas that you can stop and read and look at mementos that have been collected over the years. And they had a whole thing on Buzz Aldrin and how it was so special that he was a 33rd degree and is a 33rd degree because I think that's interesting. I had never really seen that in real life. And he's somebody that most people are familiar with. Now, if you choose not to do the Scottish rite, you can do the York rite. And that one is really an American rite.
Okay.
It was taken from England and practiced really long ago. But then when we moved over to the Americas, we kind of picked up the York rite and made it our own. And so, the most famous part of the York rite is probably the Knights Templars. I mean, if you've watched movies or you've heard about the Knights Templars, if you've read the Da Vinci Code or watched the movie, you've definitely heard about it. Now, there's no historical evidence that connects the Mason Knights Templars with the medieval Knights Templars, to be clear, and they don't claim a connection. And so, just to be clear, it's not those Knights Templars, but you do see that in fiction, right? You see there's this connection in fictional works that doesn't really exist. One really fascinating and interesting aspect of the Knights Templar is that in order to join, you have to be a Christian. It is only open to Christians. And your task as a knight is that you are required to protect and defend the Christian faith. So apologists, if we were going to join, we would be joining the Knights Templar. So we would go up the York rite. Now, I'm not saying Christians should go out and join, but I did think that was an interesting thing to maybe perhaps bring up, because we will be talking about religion here in a bit, and knowing that there is a sect, a part of the Masons that is specifically for Christians, and the defense of the Christian faith is really fascinating to me.
So I think, like, on the outside, it almost sounds like, hey, you're joining this club. We're going to make sure you're a good person. So we're going to, like, vet you. I do remember that term. Like, man, they gave me the third degree, right? You were questioning. Yeah. And so it almost seems like, and then even hearing this, Knights Templars, like, hey, I remember the Knights Templars were the ones who fought for the Holy Land, right? I don't know if they just picked that name up just to kind of piggyback off what they did to maybe draw Christians. But stuff that I've listened to, a lot of former Masons, especially higher up ones, say it's satanic.
Yeah.
So I think we're definitely not saying Christians should join this, right?
No.
Okay. So
definitely not saying that.
Okay, good. So how would we say, I don't know, were you able to find anything like how this could be, like, considered satanic?
Yeah. So when I'm doing research on topics like this and something is called satanic, I go to the people that I would think, okay, they're definitely going to call it satanic if it's satanic. So I went to Walter Martin, who wrote Kingdom of the Cults. I went to John Ankerberg, and I looked at Hank Hanegraaff's stuff and really tried to find, like, what do they say about the Masons, and would it be considered satanic? I think it's more occultic than satanic. So we need to just be careful with the words that we choose. And we can see that in the different rituals that they partake in. But ultimately, I think the answer is no, it's not satanic. However, it does merit some discussion. The first is it even a religion? Is it a religion of its own? Like, does it qualify as a religion? That is one question that a lot of scholars that I watched and read over the course of this research asked themselves. Is it a religion? And so if we go with the definition of religion being a system of beliefs and practices related to something supernatural or sacred or divine, and it involves rituals or ethics or a community of believers, and we apply that definition to the Freemasons, Freemasonry would be qualified as a religion. I'm going to call it a worldview, which is just, it's not a religion. There are upwards of 10,000 religions in the world. So Freemasonry could absolutely be considered a religion based on that definition. So then you need to ask yourself, okay, what do they believe? If they are a religion, what is it that Freemasons believe? So because they profess to not hold to any particular religion. Mm-hmm. And they're very clear about that. And one of the things that I watched a lot of video with current Masons talking about their beliefs and what some of the rules are. And one of the rules is you can't talk about religion or politics in their meetings. It's off limits. So I guess they're not getting together for Thanksgiving because that's when everybody talks about religion and politics. Right. But, so they don't hold to any particular religion, but in order to be a Freemason, you must believe in a supreme being. I'm going to give a caveat to that because it seems like in recent times, like we're talking just the last couple of years, some Masonry groups are allowing atheists to join their ranks. Why would this be? Because there's a rise of atheism happening, especially in European countries. Mm-hmm. So some French lodges has started to allow people who do not profess a belief in a supreme being to be members of the lodge. So you are starting to find a few atheists join the Masonic Lodge. So who is this supreme being is the next question, right? Mm-hmm. Are they worshiping Satan? No, that's not their definition of the supreme being. Their supreme being is whoever you call God. Now, of course, you could argue Satanists call Satan God, but that's not really true. We have a lot of false ideas about what Satanists believe. But for the most part, it's pretty clear that most Masons profess that they are worshiping the Christian God. Okay. So you will find a King James version of the Bible in most Masonic lodges. It does play a part in their rituals. However, if you are in a mostly Islamic country and most of your members are Muslim, you would probably have a Quran instead of a King James Bible. Mm-hmm. So they will pick whatever holy book is most relevant to most of the people in attendance. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to the supreme being idea then. If you're in a ritual that has prayer and talks about God, but then you're a group of men and you're participating in this ritual, but your view of God is maybe you believe in the Christian God, but I believe in one of the Hindu gods. Mm-hmm. How are we participating in the same prayer to the same God? So that answers one question. One of the beliefs of the Freemasons is universalism. All theories of truth leading to God or heaven are true. It doesn't matter which God you believe in. So good as you're, and here's the second point, a good person. The second main problem with Masonry is this idea that you can earn your way into heaven. We will talk about that more in a little bit, but essentially it's a works-based group, which is why, I guess, incidentally, that they're so charitable. They are known for their charity. Part of their ritual also involves somebody that they call the worshipful master. Now, if you're on the outside and you hear that, you assume what? What do you assume of a worshipful master?
Yeah, some cult leader for sure who's speaking to Satan behind the curtain and
something like that. And interestingly, curtains used to be part of the ritual. There were curtains that were put up, and the worshipful master would stand behind the curtain, and there was a tiny hole, and they would recite the things by memory. But really, a worshipful master is the person who resides over the meetings. He is the guy who manages lodge business. He also serves as the guide over rituals and ceremonies, and he's elected. So it's not like he's called into this role. There's an election every year. And so that takes us back to, where does this idea of Satanism come into play? So the Catholics have a very long history of being unapproving of the Masons. In fact, they called it the synagogue of Satan. And this goes way back into like the early 1700s, when Masonry was sort of coming of age. And so you're like, oh, okay, so what did they say? So Catholics forbade any member from joining the Masons. If you joined the Masons as a Catholic, you were excommunicated and you could no longer take Holy Communion. Okay. And you're thinking, okay, so that's a long time ago. Surely they've changed they have not changed their view on this. In fact, in 2023, Pope Francis reconfirmed that Catholics may not join the Freemasons, or there would be those consequences associated with excommunication and whatnot. Now, I don't know if there are Catholics who are in the Masons, but the Catholic Church really looks down on that. The other aspect of Satanism comes from a guy named Albert Pike. Albert Pike, he is often misquoted in literature as saying that the Masons worshipped Lucifer. I'm not going to dig way into this rabbit hole because we could spend hours and hours just on this guy. But he wrote a book about it, about morals and morals and laws, maybe is the name of it. But even in YouTube videos that I watched about the Masons, and I'm reading the comments, there were lots of people saying, well, they claim to worship Lucifer. And then I go to the actual quote, and that's not what Albert Pike actually said. It's taken out of context. It's cherry picked. And as Christians, we need to be careful about the quotes that we're using to support whatever idea we have. Just like we shouldn't cherry pick scripture, we should do the work and find out contextually what people mean by certain things. And essentially, I mean, again, it depends on who you're talking to, but it seems like Albert Pike wasn't really promoting this idea that Masons worship Lucifer. And even former Masons who sort of claim it, I honestly think that they're thinking of it more as a cult, not as Satanism. And I think it's you don't really understand Satanism if that's what you're calling it, because that's not really what Satanists believe. And so it's just, I mean, we see lots of things labeled as satanic, or Satanism, not satanic. A lot of things are satanic, but Satanism in general. But we don't take the time to kind of figure out what that means. And so I really think that when they're calling it that, they're actually saying, it's more of a cult. There are some rituals that are kind of odd, some symbols that maybe we should be, thinking like, are they related to the occult? Yeah. They've got secret handshakes. They've got secret passwords. They get new names. I mean, there's all sorts of different things. We talked about the all-seeing eye, different symbology that they have, that, because we're not privy necessarily to all of the information, we just have to be careful about taking one person's word for it and really be willing to do the research and figure out, okay, that guy said that, what did he mean by it? Or remember that every lodge is independently managed. So that's another thing to remember. So one guy's experience in a particular lodge may not be the experiences held by most Masons, because just like, McDonald's is independently managed, lodges are independently controlled by that group of men who are a member of that lodge. And they can kind of veer away from the mainstream.
Yeah. So you might go into a lodge in England or Scotland that looks completely different from something you see down your street here in America, or something in the Middle East. If there's an Islamic lodge, or even an Islamic lodge here, probably looks way different than what another one would look
Yeah,
like.
and their rituals will be different. They might even change some of the wording of some of the oaths that they take. It really depends on the individual lodges that you're looking at. I mean, we can talk in generalities about, you know, the conflicts with Christianity. And I've already mentioned them, this universalism idea and kind of eliminating the role of Jesus Christ, right? By saying that we're saved by our works. And that gets us into what they call the celestial lodge above. Our works are what get us in there. And then there are lots of pagan influences that we can look at and say, oh, that's a rabbit trail that we're not going to get into. But if you are interested in those things, there are whole books written on the different ideas that might be linked to name your favorite conspiracy.
Because I've seen too where like I want to say in a parade I was at, like the Shriners, right? I remember seeing them in a parade. Shaquille O'Neal, those people who watch sports, like I remember in a few interviews he's had where he has like a massive ring on his finger that's like, that guy's huge, but it like takes up his whole hand. Yeah. And it's like, it's a Masonic ring, and he's like always talking about giving and doing stuff like that. So it almost kind of seems like appealing in a sense that, oh yeah, I could be a good person and I could do all these things and that'll get me into heaven or whatever. And the universalism for sure. It's like, so what? Jesus died for your sins, but yet you're going to take basically any road and just kind of ignore what he did, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of eliminates Jesus's, I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? Like and again, Masons do not profess to be Christians. So it would make sense that perhaps they wouldn't believe. And how can they be most enticing to as many people as possible? Well, okay, so let's make it universalism and good works. We want to be good people. One of their one of their main goals is to make good men better. And how can they do that? They take lots of oaths about how they can be better men. And then you mentioned the Shriners. That is it's one of the groups you can join. There are about 200,000 Shriners. They are known for their fez, the hat that's red and black, and it's got a little tassel. You see them in parades, usually driving little cars. And they actually operate children's, it's almost like a children's healthcare system, because it's a lot of hospitals that they operate for kids. And no matter what your situation financially, you do not have to pay. If you are getting treatment for burns or orthopedic issues or spinal cord issues or cleft lips, you can go to a Shriners hospital and get free medical care. And there's literally no obligation to pay. That's a big deal. The other thing is, if you're looking at the finances, I read somewhere that Shriners, and this number just seems astronomical to me, but I found it in several places, and not just on the Shriners website, like several places, where they're donating, the Masons in general are donating like $2.5 million every day to different charities. And particularly the Shriners. I mean, it takes a lot of money to give free medical care to kids all the way up through 18. And yet they're doing it. So that would be enticing if you're kind of an altruistic person who just wants to give charitably, and you read about that. You might be like, I want to be in an organization like that. And you might be willing to join it because you're thinking, I'm just going to join a charity and we're going to do good things and we're going to be in parades. And they don't ask the public for money. Like, they're not doing like huge campaigns for public assistance. It is funded by the membership, which I just think is so crazy that they're donating that much money. And yet, I mean, no one can deny, I mean, this is good work. Right. But the question then is, when they connect it to their belief system, they are doing the good works to get themselves into heaven, or at least that's what their belief system holds. And that doesn't align the Christian worldview. So if you're a Christian in that organization, and you're being told, I've got to do these good works to get into heaven, you're forgetting the role of Christ. And salvation is through grace alone, right? Good works are an important part of our Christian lifestyle, but they should be a natural outpouring of our faith, not something that is a check mark to get us into heaven.
Yeah, for sure. Amen. I wanted to ask you about some of the rituals they do.
Yeah.
So I've seen videos where, like the guys have to go in, they take their shirt off, and like some of them do like different oaths or different things. Like you said, they go in with their eyes covered and they're blindfolded, and then they turn the lights on real bright and they come out, and or they'll have them go through like a maze of things, and like they're lost with the blindfold, and they take it off and now they're enlightened, so to speak. Yeah. Are the rituals, I don't know, I guess as Christians we see that and we're like, that's bad, right? Yes. I know where I live here in the Southwest, being Catholic and seeing all of the rituals was like, now being Christian, we're like very, wow, that's not good, a lot of the different rituals that go on, they're like false, that we don't need to do for salvation. So the rituals these guys do, how are they extreme? Are they just, because a lot of people say, like from videos I've also seen, I wanted to share this too, a lot of the younger people are like, this is the boringest thing I've ever seen in the videos. They're like, it's boring. A lot of people fall asleep in there. And then after, they'll play cards and have food and stuff. But it's like, are these rituals something we should be, I don't know, concerned about?
I don't think so. I have never participated in that kind of ritual. Like I said, I did join a sorority in college, and we had a ritual that, is, their rituals are weird. Sometimes the Masons would say that they have patterned their ceremonies around King Solomon's temple. And so they're representing this journey from darkness to light. Like you said, it's sort of this search for enlightenment. And they do take off their shirt, and they pull their pant legs up above their knees. They have a blindfold. They have some like cable thing around their neck. And from the outside looking in, it's odd. But when you're looking at like the symbolism, they think that they're doing something that was in the original like Old Testament times, which we have to be honest, there were some temple rituals in Old Testament times that were not pleasant. Like when the sacrifices happened and the priest was covered in blood, how do you think that happened? Right?
Yeah,
like
not to pour on them. Yeah.
Gross. Yeah. And so I'm not giving them, a pass on this, but I am also saying like Old Testament rituals, if you're patterning after this is mild compared to what actually happened in Old Testament rituals. But they're, like you said, you can find hidden camera things on some of these rituals. I mean, I watched several of them. And there's one part where they pretend to take a blood oath. I've heard that in some instances they actually do get poked and they have to give blood, like the blood oath that they're taking. The ones I saw, it was like a fake, like we're slicing you. We're not really slicing open, and you're not really giving your blood. But it's more symbolic than anything. They are, like I said before, super theatrical, and some of the lodges get really into it. Full costume rooms. And it just depends on what you're watching. If you're going to see something that's real good or not so great. I'm sure funding has to do with it too. But I imagine the first time you're going through it, you're kind of like, what is happening? Yeah. And maybe it's good that they're blindfolded. And that second time they watch it, they're like, really? That's what that was? But anybody can find these on YouTube. They're not that secret. One of the things is they wear aprons. So that's an interesting thing. Like, why do they wear aprons? Stonemasons wore aprons. So it just goes back to like this, people who were actually stonemasons wearing these leather aprons, right, with their tools and whatnots. Now Freemasons are wearing these aprons that have different symbols on them that mean different things. But really it is, I would say that depending on which ritual you're going through, it is supposed to be patterned after something in the Old Testament, and it is to illustrate somebody's movement into the light or knowledge or wisdom.
Yeah.
I didn't, like I said, I didn't see anybody take a blood oath. I did see symbolic blood oaths taken. There are a lot of oaths that they take. That's another thing. Like, do you solemnly swear to do this? I do. You solemnly swear, and they have to repeat all of these different oaths. Like, one of them was, I had to listen to it again because I missed it the first time, but you won't, you won't pursue the wife of another lodge member. It is one of the oaths that you take. Like, that's kind of where'd that one come from?
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause you're always thinking, like, who's writing these oaths and why are they writing these oaths? Like, who went after the Grand Lodge guy, wife? Yeah. And so I think that if we just thinking practically, like, some of the oaths are kind of weird. Most of them are, you're not going to divulge the secret. Like, that's a really big obligation, is this secrecy component. They pledge to keep it secret. This is, I don't know how to explain it other than that. Like, they're literally pledging that they would be willing to die if they shared the secrets of the Masons with people who are not Masons. Now, I tried to find instances where this was, like, came to pass, right? Like, oh, has somebody shared the secrets and then, like, they're dead? Because that's the oath they take. One guy. So, it's there's not a lot of evidence to support it. His name is William Morgan. He was in 1826. He was a Mason, and he said that he was going to write a book exposing all of the Masonic secrets. And one day he gets kidnapped, and his body was never found. And so the theory is that they took their oaths seriously in that instance. But most Masons will say, even former Masons will say, that was symbolic. They're not really going to kill you.
Yeah. To scare members or something.
William Morgan was probably an exception to that.
Yeah.
Because all things point to him being murdered. And then another interesting point, because you were talking about the influence on Americans, that was the first time we got a third political party in the United States called the Anti-Masons.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. See,
Wow.
So now you can tell your fifth graders, hey, did you know? Yeah. Because people were like, oh my gosh, they actually killed this guy. We need to have, some control.
Anti-Mason.
And so it really made a rise into this anti-Masonic movement. Yeah.
So I think the big question is Mormonism.
Oh,
yeah.
That's a big one.
How did it seems like, and we kind of have a big Mormon population here in our area, but it seems like Mormonism and Masonry are very similar.
Yeah.
I forget the guy's name who started Mormonism.
Smith?
Joseph Smith. He was a Mason, right?
He was a master Mason.
So how are they similar?
Oh,
or are they similar?
Yeah. Oh, they are. They're definitely similar. So Joseph Smith, some report that he was the highest degree. So one of the misconceptions is that the highest degree of a Mason is this 33rd degree. That's not true. Remember, Master Mason is the highest of most Masons. So Joseph Smith was a Master Mason, which is the highest in the Blue Lodge, right? And he was said to have been raised at sight. So what that means is that the Grand Master of the lodge that he was part of in Illinois moved him up the ranks very quickly to Master Mason. Like, he didn't have to go through all of the requirements that you normally have to do to get to the 3rd degree. And so he didn't have to wait. There wasn't a waiting period for him. And then when he joined, he was the kind of guy. I watched a video it was featuring two Latter-day Saints. Casey Griffiths is the host of this YouTube channel that I watched, and he was interviewing a Mason LDS guy, Lon Tibbetts, and they were actually at a Masonic lodge. I think they were in Utah. And the question was, exploring this LDS connection with the Masons. And, he's like, I'm a Mason and I'm LDS. And he's been the Grand Master, and he's the highest level, like 30. I think he said he was 33rd degree. He might've been 32nd degree. I can't remember. But the guy, Casey Griffiths, the guy interviewing this Mason, said, so tell me, what are the connections? Like, how do they overlap? Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, it's pretty clear once you get into it, because I thought this was fascinating that the guy said this, but he said Joseph Smith was open to any truths he could find, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, did he say? I listened to it again, and I was like, he really did say that. So what were the truths that he found as a Mason? Well, he adopted the ceremonies. It's pretty clear that the temple ceremonies weren't created until after Joseph was a Mason and had experienced the rituals there. And he patterned the temple ordinances, especially the endowment ordinance that LDS members take at the temple after the temple rituals for the Masons. And what he did was he pulled those rituals, made them into more religious in tone. So it became a ritual about the origins of creation, for example. And that's what you get when you go through the temple endowments at an LDS temple, which is, to clarify for anybody who might not be familiar, LDS members have a ward that they go to typically on a Sunday, right? And those are the ones that are in like brown brick buildings, and they're shared by multiple groups of LDS. And then you have those beautiful temple buildings that exist, marble and flowers, and they're just beautiful. And you have to have what's called a temple recommend or a card that you've been approved to be able to go in and participate in the temple ordinances that happen there. Some of the temple ordinances that happen there, including this endowment ordinance. You also have family sealings where they seal families together. This is if you've ever been invited to an LDS wedding. If you're not LDS, you can't go to the actual sealing ceremony because it happens in the temple, but you can go to their party afterward. Or they will also baptize the dead in the temple. And so you've got that happening. And then you've also got this very secret ceremony that you can go through that kind of shows what's happening. Now, there was a guy a few years ago who took a hidden camera. He still had his temple recommend, but he was on his way out of the LDS church. He was leaving. And he took his camera and went in and did the endowment ceremony. So you can actually find those online. Again, nothing's really secret in the internet age. And if you compare their ceremony to what we've seen in the Masons, there's definitely overlap all the way to the aprons. Okay, so they also have apron kind of things that they wear in the temple ceremonies. I think, yes, there is a connection. And Brigham Young had specifically said that there was a Masonic connection to the things that they do in the temple. So I would say you really can't deny the connection. But Masonic lodges are not LDS temples and vice versa. Just because you're LDS doesn't mean you're joining the Masons, and just because you're a Mason doesn't mean you're joining LDS. But we do see a lot of overlap in their traditions.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's say, I had given you an example. I was looking for seminary school, and one of the schools I found was specifically saying you could get a degree in eschatology or like in end times theology.
Yeah.
And I was looking up the professor, and the professor, all the books for some reason that this name had kept coming up were Mason books. And so I called the school, and lo and behold, the president of the school is a Freemason, and he has, and basically the school was like a universalism type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do we as Christians, when we run into somebody who's, say, for example, a Freemason, and, it's maybe, I don't know, your elderly next door neighbor, and he's like, hey, you should come to the lodge with me and stuff. How do we as Christians respond to this? How do we like witness to somebody like that?
Well, I wrote a whole book on that called Bridge Building Apologetics, but it's my favorite question to answer because I think not the specific question about a Mason asking you to join, but somebody who has a different worldview than you asking you a question is sort of my favorite thing to talk about, because I think as Christians, we get really nervous about having to talk about not necessarily our faith, but having to interact about something that we might not have a full understanding of. And what if we get something wrong? Or what if they hate me if I say no? I think the first rule of thumb is to be gentle and respectful, which sort of comes out of 1 Peter 3:15, which says, always be prepared to give a defense for the hope within you and do so with gentleness and respect. And for me, that gentleness and respect is really important, especially as a Christian. We shouldn't be coming in with guns blazing, especially to our elderly neighbor, who's probably been a Mason his whole life, right?
Right.
And may not even know what Masonry, some of the symbols and things stand for. That's the other thing. How many Christians can eloquently state the gospel message? Not a lot, according to polls. A lot of Christians get flustered, or they forget certain aspects of what the gospel message is. Or if we're talking about LDS, we can spend a whole lot of time learning about what Latter-day Saints believe. And then when you're in a conversation with them, they'll be like, I didn't know we believed that. I literally been in a conversation with a Latter-day Saint, and he's like, I think you might know more about my religion than I know.
Yeah.
Christians are guilty of this too. So going in with this desire to learn, hey, tell me more about that. Why are you inviting me to the lodge? What do you do at the lodge? Can you tell me more about why you're a Mason? What is it that Masons believe? And you may discover that your elderly neighbor has no idea about the symbols or the background or whatever. May not know that maybe entered as a Christian and never picked up on the fact that it's universalist.
Yeah.
Or thought that the good works things was just part of their natural desire to do good works, not to earn their way into heaven. So we can't assume that just because we know what the Masons purport to believe, that applies to every single Mason. And if it does, let's say he says, oh, well, I love it because you can worship any God, and you get saved because you do all of these great things. That's when you can say, oh, well, as a Christian, I believe that Jesus is the only way to salvation. And we're saved by grace, not through works. And I also believe there's only one God. And I can't participate in something that is going to claim that all paths lead to heaven, or all paths lead to salvation, because that's contrary to what the Bible says. And see where that takes you. But you could do this in a nice way. You don't have to be a jerk about it or say, well, I read you're a cult, or watch this podcast and you're definitely Satanist, which is not what I said, by the way. So I think it's really important for us to go in with this desire to learn and to understand, and not to go in with our preconceived notions of that person. I also like to use this example. It's not related to Masons, but if your neighbor put up a pro-choice sign in their front yard, right? And you could come up with a lot of reasons why they would do that. And you could make all of these assumptions. I can't believe they do that. But what if you just walked over and had a conversation with them and said, hey, I noticed you had that sign up. Can you tell me more about that? Why are you pro-choice? and see where they got their worldview from. And then, so then you could, if the opportunity came up, you could share your perspective as a pro-life person, right? As a Christian, I'm a pro-life person. This is what that means to me. How is this contrary to being pro-choice? We've lost the art of communication. We've lost this ability to ask questions and listen well. I think a lot of our problems could be solved if we just took a step back and said, hey, what is it they're saying? What is it that they actually believe? I study world religions, and it's cults and worldviews, and this is what I love to study. I as you can tell, I like geek out really easily on this stuff. But when I enter a conversation with somebody who has a belief that I've studied before, I don't actually assume that I'm right all the time. I go in and I ask them questions to see what it is they believe. What is it that draws you into Buddhism? What do you like about it? And I've sort of taken a page out of Wynne Corduan's book, Neighboring Faiths, where at the end of his every chapter, which is about a different worldview, he'll say, so you meet a Muslim, for example. This is what they believe about Jesus, but you should ask them, hey, what is it that you believe about Jesus? And if they say this, maybe you could go in with this follow-up question or a statement. But there's no one size fits all with our neighbors or the people we interact with on a daily basis. Just like that not every Christian is the same. There are Bible-believing Christians, and then there are some Christians who maybe are more universal in their approach. And you're asking yourself, well, what is the definition of Christianity? Well, as a Christian, I believe that Jesus is the only way. He is the way, the truth, and the life. I can only get to heaven, only to the Father through him. That's what a Christian is. So then you start asking, like, okay, maybe not everybody understands that. And so they're just taking the title that they were given from their parents. How many times have you met somebody, they're like, oh, I'm a Christian because I was raised in a Christian home.
Yeah.
That doesn't really make you a Christian, right?
Right.
Some Masons are Masons because their dads and their grandpas were Masons, and they just did it because that's what you did in their family. You might not believe any of the things. So then you have to say, well, if you don't believe it, why are you a member? Couldn't you just serve at your local church instead? If you like doing good works, if you like doing charity work, maybe you could start serving in the local organizations that are in your community rather than joining this group that believes things that are contrary to the most important thing about who you are, and that is your Christian worldview, the fact that you love Jesus and believe that he is the only way.
Amen to that. So kind of wrapping up, are Masons influential today? Are Masons, I think one of the conspiracies is every president has been a Mason, or you have to be a Mason or in one of these secret societies to become president, right? Are Masons influential today?
I think it's not like this big bad wolf kind of influence. I do think it's more of their charitable work. I think that they're influential amongst each other as like a networking organization. So if you were to join like the Rotary, right? That's a networking organization, or there are business organizations you can join to network with other business people. I think the Masons are kind of a networking organization at this point, helping each other out. As far as influence politically, I don't see a lot of evidence to support that conspiracy theory, but I would love if somebody like has that evidence to share it with me, because I will go down that rabbit hole and learn more about it. It is, I think, coincidence that so many presidents have been Masons. I don't think you have to be a Mason to be president. I don't know that Donald Trump is a Mason. Maybe he is. I don't know that Barack Obama was a Mason. I don't know all of the presidents that have been Masons. But surely if they're Masons, it doesn't necessarily mean they subscribe again to the beliefs that exist with the Masons. They might just be in it for the networking opportunities, and in which case, okay. But also as a Christian, you should check that. as far as other political influence, perhaps in the founding of the United States, it was influential. As I stated, because there were Masons, so many Masons who were part of the founding fathers. But as far as its reach today and its influence in the United States today, I just don't see it. Yeah. And the response to that is, from a conspiracy theorist, will be, you don't see it because they're hiding it from you, right? Okay, but what is there to gain for them to hide information from us, aside from their secret rituals, which really you can find on the internet? What are they keeping from people, and why? What's the end game? And that's a question I ask a lot with conspiracy theories, right? Like with people who believe anything that is kind of not mainstream. What is the end game of the people who are keeping that secret from you? What are they trying to gain? And really there's not a solid answer that satisfies to that. Especially with the advent of the internet, there's not a lot of secrets that can still take place. I'm not saying that they can't. There could be a great conspiracy that none of us know about, only a few people. But how do they keep it that secret if there is?
With 6 million people, right?
People talk.
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of oath you've taken, right? Like you're talking about it with your friend over coffee, and somebody overhears. Now, oh my gosh, did you hear? I heard somebody at a coffee shop talking about, and then that's how things spread. Right. And I don't think with the technology we have today that a grand conspiracy could really be kept secret. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the 70s, maybe in the 60s, and way before, but now with technology where everything is on the internet, you cannot, we saw what happened with, you could be at a concert and your life could be completely changed because it goes viral the next day, right? Like I just don't think we're going to keep that secret.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Any final thoughts?
I guess the big thing is that I think we've got these thoughts about secret groups, and they're really, I love learning about them. I think they're really interesting, and it is kind of fun to explore secret things and learn about them. But I don't think that there's a huge Masonic goal. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I do not think that Christians really should be joining the Masons because it is so contrary to our core belief system. For sure. There are other organizations that you can join that achieve similar purposes that are not contrary to Christianity. So I think we just need to ask the Holy Spirit for guidance and wisdom when we're considering the groups that we join or the people that we do things with, but we just need to be careful and vigilant. And when we meet somebody who's part of an organization like the Masons, to be kind in our approach and to ask really good questions, and then to listen well, and offer insight if they're open to it, and maybe not gossip about the person afterwards. And I think that would solve a lot of problems in our world if we were to just listen well.
That's good. Well put, for sure. Lindsey, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great conversation for sure. Really excited to see this new book that you have coming out. I think that's awesome. Where can people find your work at? LindseyMedenwaldt.com. And I spelled MEDENWALDT. I'm married into the name, and it's a solid name. But LindseyMedenwaldt.com. I publish with the Christian Research Journal as well. I've written a lot of things with them about ancient aliens and New Age things. So if you're interested in those kinds of things, that's where you can go to find that work. And I have a Substack that I'm not so great about posting on, but I'm trying to get better. Having this manuscript due kind of took me away from Substack, but my hope is to get back to it. Awesome. Well, we wanted to say thank you to everyone who's listened. Share, like, subscribe. We know people probably search Freemasonry and see this interview. And so as we close, Lindsey had said it several times that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And there is no way to the Father except through Christ. And so we offer you the chance, and you have the chance to just cry out to the Lord. Trust him with all your heart that he is God and that he saved you and that his son died and rose again and paid the penalty for your sins. And in that belief, you'll be saved. And so we thank you again, and we'll see you guys next time.